About a year ago, I traveled to Houston, Texas to go to a conference. There's going to be about 17,000 other people there, so I was pretty excited for the conference. But I'd never been to Houston, Texas before, so I wanted to do some sightseeing before the night session began. I happened upon this coffee shop in downtown Houston, so I decided to go in and get something to drink and catch up on some reading I needed to get done. While I was inside, I happened to hear a conversation with a couple of people that were behind me, and they were talking about life and just things that kind of were going on, and for some odd reason the conversation turned to religion. A couple people made some statements about having an encounter with a couple of people who showed up at their house to talk about God and Jesus and all these different things. And one of the ladies that was sitting there, she made this comment about, I wish people would just get over God. He's so old. He's so old news. Why don't people just get over it? It's not like God can help us in this day and age. Humanity is at its end and it's over with. God is not here to help. God is not anything. And I just couldn't help but think, really? Have you really looked around and seen the world today to really understand that we are in more desperate need of a God now than we were ever before? But what really stuck out to me was the comment about God being old, or God being for those people and not for this people. Really? So you think that the God that we talk about, the Jesus that we proclaim, is some old dude sitting on a throne with a cane and old beard and everything? Is that the God you envision? I tell you about that moment because for me, when I think about Jesus, when I think about God, I think about an onward, more progressive God. A God who's always pulling his people forward, who always moving his people to bigger and better things. I think of a God who from the beginning of time has had this plan to restore its creation back to the originality of where it came from. And see, when I think of that God, it also puts in context the gospel. You know, the gospel is the story of who God is, who we are, our connection and then disconnect, and God's subsequent plan of restoration for us. See, I think the gospel, God and us, all go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. God supersedes all of that, but the story of the gospel is in us. It is about us. It is for us, and it is with us. And the gospel is ahead of us. We don't serve a God that's stuck in the yesteryears. We don't serve a God who is all about the old school. We serve a God that is constantly moving forward, progressing, pulling us onward, leading us to bigger and better things. That is the God we serve. For example, when you look in Scripture, when you look at the ancient texts, and you see rules and laws about how we were to treat one another in case of a situation. There was a law in the Old Testament that said an eye for an eye. So basically, if you did something wrong to someone, they had every right to replicate what you did wrong to them back to you. So if you stole from them, they could chop off your hand. And in literal, the eye for the eye, if you took an eye, they could take your eye back. But as you see throughout the scriptures, progressively, God is moving humanity past our brokenness, past our insecurities, past our sinful, depraved selves. As you see, then Jesus comes along and says, look, you've heard it said that an eye for an eye, and that was the correct way of living in that time period. But I'm telling you that you should love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Jesus wanted us to see beyond everyone else's brokenness. He wanted to see beyond our own brokenness to how God had designed us to live. That is the premise of the gospel, that there is so much more that we're missing out as a humanity, as a creation. The Creator is pulling us back, pulling us on, pulling us forward to what He originally created us to be. Paul talks about this in Ephesians. He talks about a God who is immeasurably more. I just love that word, immeasurably. There's nothing in this realm, in the realm over, or in the realm to come, that could even possibly give us a tiny bit of measure of who God is. Because God is immeasurably. He's immeasurable. There is nothing in this world that can stack up to who God is. And because of that, we are promised, if our faith lives in Him, immeasurably more. I don't know about you, but that seems like an onward, a forward-thinking, a more progressive God. It doesn't mean that His characteristics have changed. It doesn't mean that He's flopping back and forth of who He wants to believe and what He is. No, God is always the same God. But it's the same God moving us to a bigger and better life. He isn't God stuck in the old. He isn't God stuck in the death. He is a God stuck in the moving to the new, a God living in the new. There's a story in the Old Testament about the prophet Ezekiel. And he tells us that God, in His Spirit, took him to this valley. And the valley was full of dry bones as far as the eye could see. That's all there is. It's just dry bones everywhere. I mean, death has come to this place. And there's no life from it. And some of you would say, you know, Michael, that's me. That's my life. There's nothing else. There's no greater. There's no moving onward. There's no progressing forward. This is my life. This is where I'm stuck in. It's dead. And God took Ezekiel to that place, and I'm sure Ezekiel felt the same way. Like, God, why would you bring me here? Why would you leave me in this place? There's nothing here. There's nothing for me to see here. There's nobody to tell about your love or to prophesy about the future that is coming. God, this place is dead. God says, you just wait, because I am the God of immeasurably more, and there is nothing that can't be moved onward, that can't be pulled forward in me. And so God tells Ezekiel, start prophesying to the bones. Tell the bones that their bones are going to come together. Tell them that skin and organs and tissues and tendons and muscle are going to all start forming on the bones. And then tell them that I'm going to breathe life into them. And so Ezekiel's like, okay, and he starts prophesying to the bones, and bones start clicking in places, and organs and tendons and muscle and skin and eyes, and everything starts forming on these once dry bones. And then we see God breathe life into them. This is an onward and forward moving God. The gospel is an onward and forward moving telling of what God is, who we are, and God's reclaiming of His most prized creation. So may you know God. May you know a forward and onward and more progressive God. May you know that He is actively trying to reclaim you, trying to pull you onward, trying to move you forward. And may you know in the deep depths of your heart that the God who is immeasurably more can bring your life back from the dead.